Our next speaker is Milind Kamkolkar, and so you'll love Milind as well. I watched him, I stalked him on TED Talks, and he is the CDO at Cellarity, which is a flagship pioneering company for the design of novel medicines, targeting cell behavior. So super, super interesting, super important. But what I liked best is he's a Ramones fan. So we actually spent so much time talking about music, and it just reminded me of sometimes when my dogs are out of control during a call like this, I play the Ramones to help calm them down. They love the Ramones as well. But anyways, Milind is a great individual as well, a great leader. I already mentioned his TED Talks. He's considered a top 150 leader and thought leader in digital health specifically, big into AI, big data. He serves on numerous boards. He's an advisor to startups and VC firms, all focused on life sciences through digital and again, data and AI. Just another phenomenal speaker we have ready for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over, and here we go with Milind.
So hi, my name is Milind Kamkolkar. I'm the Chief Digital and Data Officer for Cellarity, a flagship pioneering company. We're a company that is pioneering a way of looking at biology new from an emergent lens in many ways, from the perspective of cell behaviors, and using those cell behaviors and our understanding of cell behaviors in disease biology to identify and generate new medicines for previously complicated diseases or diseases we're aware of today, where the reductionist approach of trying to identify a gene, protein, or pathway singularly has not really yielded in many ways a comprehensive solution for patient care. I've been here for almost 2 years. Prior to that, my history has been in different startup companies since the dawn of the Human Genome Project, and working in informatics companies that really tried to consumerize that, specifically Double Twist. Effectively, a number of folks started from Apple who had this vision of how do we consumerize the Human Genome Project. I've been in large-scale consulting and boutique consulting to think about how do you really do transformational programs at scale across multiple countries. I've also been in specific niche areas and how do you apply innovation to rethink, if you will, or reimagine the nature of much of what our industry has thought about. And last but not least, I was the first chief data officer in the pharmaceutical industry from an enterprise perspective. And all of these culminations kind of led me to really thinking about what did I want to do when I grow up, particularly in my last gig at Sanofi, of course, prior to that as the head of AI and data science at Novartis. And I think it came down to really three things. And I find that this tends to resonate also with a number of different chief digital officers or data officers that are emerging in the industry today. The first thing is having a grassroots basis of what is the core business of any initiative where a digital operating model can in fact be applied. In my case, and what I believe is in the pharmaceutical industry, it is really in the nature of understanding biology and creating medicines to target that biology so that it can help humans, frankly, when they are either sick or facing ailment. The second thing that I believe is critical when thinking about how do you really embrace the role of a chief digital officer or a CDO, let's, for argument's sake, the D could be digital, data, all of the above, is the fact that we have two objectives really in being this digital or data officer. The first objective is to what I call do things better. Do things better to me are the operational efficiencies under which technology, processes, and skill sets can be applied to really amplify, if you will, or accelerate the opportunity to do, if you will, things that were once held as sacred cows faster, better, or cheaper. And when you look at the advent of digital in much of these companies, we can argue that that is where the major focus, if you will, of business transformation is taking today. To be clear, can we identify targets faster? Can we accelerate the development of chemical compounds towards an IND stage faster, cheaper? When we run clinical trials, can we make them more efficient? I think if anything, what COVID has taught us is that the notion of virtual trials is already an opportunity that we could use so that we're not held captive, if you will, with site-specific ways of organizing and managing and running the trials. Additionally, in the space, be it from the first time we experience, if you will, or have an opportunity to engage with a patient, the notion of customer experience and customer engagement comes up. And now here is where, if you will, the opportunity to think horizontally across different industries, take those horizontal learnings, but now configure them towards the regulatory standards that actually exist in our arena, whether it's from Salesforce optimization, marketing excellence, or in fact, how we price drugs and be able to forecast the nature of pricing drugs by taking advantage of data types, by taking advantage of technologies and other such approaches, orthogonal data sources as well, to really start identifying what is the best pricing structure for a given medicine, and how then do we engage really at nurturing the relationship between a physician and a patient. I'm a big believer, and we often think about the notion of customer engagement in the pharmaceutical setting. We typically think about it primarily from how do we improve patient engagement. I would argue, though, that is not the most or the only important relationship. In fact, it's actually that sacred relationship between primarily a patient and their physician, where we can amplify, if you will, the nature of engagement with a physician, and we can amplify the nature of an engagement with a patient, whether it be understanding and being aware of disease biology indications they may be facing as a patient. It may be encouraging then the broader network of those people, such as caregivers, nurses, other such staff that are vital to the support of the patient journey. But really thinking about where do we engage them throughout the context, if you will, from awareness to adherence to hopefully cure or disease management. And when you think about all of those things combined, these are all effectively operational efficiencies, as I mentioned earlier. The second piece of digital, as we consider the role of the CDO in a pharma company, is what you could call doing better things. And in doing better things, we may rephrase that as breakthrough innovation, 10x thinking, really going for exponential gain. And what you find actually is in most companies, this is really where the change management occurs. Because this is really where processes that exist today, workflows that enable a particular endpoint to be reached today, are now treated as sacred cows. Why? It's very difficult to create breakthrough or disruptive innovation if you're not prepared to actually break and move through, or if you're not prepared to disrupt current mindsets. You can always have the same process, but it could be done exponentially better, which is more than just a performance gain, but it in fact is very much a business gain. So you could argue, when you think about combining those two equations now, doing things better or doing better things, the doing things better is often an economic denominator that a CDO today must be able to articulate effectively in order to gain the change management necessary of an organization to adopt those capabilities. For doing better things, this is where now certainly a bit of cheerleading experience, if you will, helps, but also the notion of empowering people to make sure that it's their idea. And I think what we've seen in the industry so far is that many of these digital organizations have grown initially as sort of the shiny new toy or shiny new object-based organizations with limited budgets, where it was often done as a nice to have, to now where we're seeing today P&L responsibilities, profit and loss responsibilities, with respect to the economic advantage a digital innovation can actually lead. In fact, I would take it even one step further, that the benefit of being able to work in a digital operating model is where that operating model in and of itself aligns the organization to the forward-looking years to come. It helps prep them to be, frankly, a more nimble business. The data and analytics that comes through there is really where the value creation comes. So when I look at a CDO today, I really view the CDO's role in pharma as being one of an innovation agent, two of a business leader with real P&L responsibility, and last but not least, the opportunity to be someone who can share that knowledge, because if you look also at the tenure of most CDOs in industry, they tend to be around 2 to 3 years on average. That's important to recognize, because pharma companies today, if they're going to institute a CDO, they need to also create the career path and the progression, if you will, of what that CDO's role may be. A good friend of mine who was once the first CDO in industry, she was a CDO of Harvard, once told me that, you know, our roles in many ways are roles that are destined to be eliminated over a period of years. Why? Because now the digital operating model is simply business. It's not digital, it's just the operating model. Also, the utility of data and being a data conscious organization, not necessarily a data driven organization, but really a data conscious organization, is one where the blending of both knowledge, experience, and numbers can come together to derive an insight to make better decision making through that organization. I would urge, though, that all CDOs in pharma need to also consider what I would call digital dystopia. Digital dystopia is a real thing. We've seen it already play out in the healthcare field, specifically the role that misinformation or extrapolated information or retracted information can have in the world of what I would say is becoming more common, bench chair science or armchair science. And armchair science is really the philosophy where, with all due respect to BuzzFeed, where BuzzFeed and a nature journal actually sit on the same plane in terms of factual accuracy and to be able to determine what sickness and health actually looks like and how people should engage with that specific information. I also find that when you do create this dystopian outlet, excuse me, whether it be through the sharing of information or the promotion of specific material, I think every CDO out there at the top of their agenda should also be considering developing proactively the antidote to dystopian fallout that comes as a result of digital engagement. For example, when you're thinking about a wearable whose interface with a patient is an app, if we take in the area of depression as an example, and you may use some very, very sophisticated computer vision algorithms that are able to detect facial constructs that indicate someone may be going through a depression state. The last thing you want to do is to irresponsibly place a quantitative chart that indicates how depressed they are. And I have seen these time and time again in the pursuit of what I would say frivolous mindsets, inconsiderate mindsets, trying to build up applications simply because it's a cool app. When in actual fact, the reality of that situation is potentially moving that existing patient into even more severe depression. I find that we as CDOs have a huge responsibility on our shoulders to shepherd, if you will, shareholders' interests. And these shareholders are not just financial shareholders, but it's also our patient advocates. It is also trial advocates or investigator advocates. It is also scientific advocacy as well. And the opportunity that digital brings to the table is to start creating narratives that are more digestible to the appropriate audience at hand, whether it in fact be from a simple dashboard in an app to a more digestible format of real science happening today. For me, I think if anything, one of the learnings we can take coming from COVID is seeing the number of people who now understand what a cytokine storm is, as an example, or the number of people that talk about the spikes on the COVID protein, or the number of people that are thinking through why exactly is a mask important and what is it actually doing? In many of these instances, digital has a role to play. For example, as you've probably heard, I've had a bit of a cough right now. I can tell you it's funny how the conversations with people today, I have to almost say, look, it's not COVID, but it is an allergy. But the fact that we have these seasonal fluctuations is something that, frankly, one would expect at this time of the year, which can be a digital incentive to be able to promote and help understand potential pathology and the support of a patient. So I want to leave you with this, if you don't mind. Being a CDO is not an easy task. Being a CDO requires you to be a smart business person first and foremost. It also requires you in parallel to be a respectful human being, humble in knowing that your contributions can actually make a major difference at bare minimum to an individual's patient life, and in the best case scenario to the supporting infrastructure around those patients that enable that person to live a fulfilling life. It also requires you, as I mentioned earlier, to be someone who is not seeking attention, if you will, simply to say, look how wonderful they are and all of the wonderful insights they are. I, in fact, share with much of my team who are infinitely smarter than I am when it comes to machine learning and digital aspects and breaking the norm, if you will, is the fact that, look, what I can give to them are simply anecdotal experiences that I hope may help shape them be the future leaders who either take on my job or take on a much better version of what I do today that is more relevant for the society that we're creating as a future. CDOs have that in their job description, although it may not often be spelled out. Technology alone, as we all know probably as CDOs, is not the rate limiting factor. In fact, adoption, interpolation, and interpretation is often the most important thing that we in our roles are expected to do. With that, I thank you for paying attention and for listening to my little diatribe. And I wish all of you budding CDOs or people who will collaborate with your chief digital or data officers in the future understand how you can best support them, more importantly, how you can best leverage those capabilities. Thank you.
All right, that was like a blitzkrieg bomb. My mind is like going nuts trying to process everything I just heard. Thank you so much, Milind, and that was incredible. You know, some of the things I wrote down, so many things. It's hard to pick just a couple. I think one good summary is the thing that you said about Disney plus pharma is pediatrics, right? Bringing in design thinking from other industries, combining those special combinations, and Angela touched on that too with the F1 example, really can recreate the entire experience. But ultimately, there's a couple other things, and I'll get back to the ultimate. But the other things were the digital disturbia, love it. The cesspool pilots, we all know about that. The digestible narratives. There was so much content there. But this is the one, this is how I would sum it up, is because it's a great reminder that we're sharing all this. We're spending some time today talking about all this stuff, and you know, chief digital officers getting together. But the bottom line at the end of the day, right, is to take whatever we're responsible for in provider side, payer, pharma, and biotech, and really help with helping others have fulfilling lives. And thank you for recentering us, because as great, as fun and important all the other stuff is, that at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.